Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we have a little bit of a special review. This is going to be review number 2700, and as I always do with these mini milestone reviews, I just want to give a huge thank you and shout out to you guys, the subscribers. It's been a great journey over the last 7.5 years. I've tasted some really interesting beers, but most importantly I've got to meet some really nice people. So a huge thank you to all of you who have supported the channel over the last years from the bottom of my heart, whether you've liked, subscribed, shared, sent me some beers, given me some information, shown me around somewhere that I've been in the world. Just a huge thank you. You guys are what make it so much fun to kind of review beers here on YouTube actually, and my fellow beer tubers as well are great. So yeah, it's been a really nice journey over the last 7.5 years. There's lots more beers out there to try though. I'm sure we'll be going for another 7.5 years, and I hope that you guys continue to enjoy the fun here on the channel. So yeah, since this is a little mini milestone review, I thought this would be a good point to kind of kick off another mini series for you. So for this one we are going to return to Finland for the first time in what feels like a good little while actually, and we are going to kick off with the beers from Riku box number 2. So a massive shout out and thank you to Riku Sanaksanaho in Oulu in the north of Finland for sorting me out with some more Finnish beers, my official Finnish beer mule. And for this particular review today we are going to go to the south of Finland, and we're returning to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before, and I'm very curious to see how this beer turns out. So we're going to go to Espoo for this one, and we're going to return to Salama Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called the Pinkdozer. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So the Dozer apparently is a series of beers that these guys do. I know there's been a couple released in this one. I couldn't get all the names, but I did see Gold Dozer when I searched for a Dozer series, Salama Brewing Company through Google. So I think there has been a few of these, but this is one that came highly recommended from Riku, and he does know his beer. So once again, thank you to Riku for making this review possible. Definitely going to be nice to return to this brewery, and I have to say I'm quite curious to see how they do a New England IPA. The first beer that I tried from these guys was the Laurel edition of the Goza Goes to Mars. I actually still have the can here because I liked the kind of space theme of it. I thought that was pretty cool, so that's going to be on my display when I move places and have my own beer display and stuff behind me. But yeah, these guys, from what I understand, are very well respected in Finland, a brewery that a lot of people really want to try. But yeah, like I said, nice to return to them, curious to see how they do a New England IPA, and thank you again to Riku, and I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this beer as well then. So yeah, let's get started. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Salama Brewing Company before, and you will see another one added to that in the fairly near future because we do have another beer to look at from these guys later. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Finnish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite a bit at the moment because I do have a good supply of Finnish beers from Riku at the moment, but hopefully we can continue to add to that regularly over the coming years, and I'm sure Riku and I will be doing more boxes. But yeah, as always, do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Salama Brewing Company. So Salama Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Espoo in Finland, which is quite close to Helsinki in the southeast of the country. But the company was founded back in 2019 by a group of friends. So the men behind this company are Christian Holmlund, Jaakko Ailio, Johannes Järvinen, and Ville Sarikoski. I do apologise for any bad Finnish pronunciations in this video. It's quite a difficult language to pronounce properly. But Christian is the CEO, and he has a background in running small and medium-sized enterprises. Jaakko is the brewer, and Johannes takes care of the bureaucracy. But Ville acts as the art director of the company. So quite a diverse background of people involved here. But the brewery itself is very close to the IKEA and the Jorvi Hospital to the north of the city, and the brewing equipment came from China, and they've got a theoretical brewing capacity of 130,000 litres, but they brewed around 50,000 litres during their first year of operations, and I believe they scaled that up a little bit over 2020. But they recently opened up a tap room at the brewery, and Jaakko says they're going to focus mainly on the lighter styles of beer, such as pale ales, IPAs, double IPAs, along with some sours actually. But there will be a few imperial stouts and things, and they are hoping to do a little bit of barrel aging and stuff in the future. I think they have done one or two bigger beers like that already, and you will see me review one of their bigger beers a little bit later on actually. But apparently they're planning to export around 70% of their beers, and as of February 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 80 different kinds of beer so far, according to Untappd. And the name of the brewery itself, Salama, that means lightning in Finnish. So basically this brewery's name is the Lightning Brewery. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Salama Brewing for the moment. Thank you to Riku once again. I'm sure that he helped me actually compile the notes for this brewery, because he's, obviously he can help me find some of the resources in Finnish. But Olut Posti, if I remember the name rightly, is a very good resource for finding information on Finnish breweries. And that's one of the things, when you do as many of these kind of beer videos as I do, you start to find good blog websites and good beer journalism websites to get all the information. So in Finland, Olut Posti is a very good one to have a look at. But yeah, like I said, that's all I can really tell you about Salama Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So like I mentioned to you at the start of the video, this one is a New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, double IPA. It comes in at 8% ABV, and there you can see the pink fist on this one. But on the back, there you can see the Salama Brewing Company symbol, and it tells you a little bit about the beer. Coming down on you like a wrecking ball, our Dozer double IPA series aims to demolish and give birth to new hedonistic avenues of double IPA enjoyment. Pinkdozer, Boom Hops, Citra, Mosaic and Enigma. And the artwork on this, of course, is by Ville Sarikoski. So yeah, all the hops in this one I am familiar with. Citra, as we know, 14% alpha acid, American, lovely kind of mango-y flavours, lots of little tropical fruit complexities as well. Mosaic, again American, 14% alpha acid roughly, and that gives you some lovely lighter kind of tangerine type notes. And then Enigma, you have some and then with Enigma you have, it's an Australian hop of course, but you've got a little bit higher alpha acid, maybe 15%, then you've got some nice gooseberry qualities to it, and it also has a little bit of a kind of red fruit, a little bit of a kind of cranberry, red curranty sort of thing from what I remember. But yeah, 440ml can this one, and I can't remember what I actually would have paid Riku for this beer, come to think of it. So yeah, really not sure about that actually, but yeah, Finland is a little bit expensive for beers. It's the most expensive country that uses the euro, of course. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very, very curious to see about this beer. But from what I understand, one of Riku's friends, or a friend of a friend or somebody, picked up this beer for him. So he's got a fairly kind of extensive mule network within Finland. So I'm quite lucky actually. He basically gets mules to give him the beers and then he mules them to me in Sweden actually. So we've got a good setup, Riku and I. We definitely do. So I need to make sure I get some Scottish beers to him, because he can just go over the border and get the Swedish stuff. So I need to make sure to get some Scottish beers to him when I do make it up to to Finland, of course. My dad and I are wanting to do a little bit of North Sweden, and if we go up there, I will be insisting that we go to Oulu in Finland as well. But yeah, as you can see with this one, and as you'd expect from a New England IPA, it's poured a lovely, very kind of bright, yellow colour, this one. It looks a little bit like a kind of mixed tropical fruit juice, this one. I always like to compare these New England IPAs to sort of different tropical fruit juices, of course, because that's just what their appearance reminds me of. This one seems to have poured with absolutely no head, which is kind of unusual, and it's definitely not the haziest or the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs that I've come across. I'm wondering if maybe it's had a little bit of sediment, but I'm pretty sure Riku got this beer quite fresh actually. I'm sure that he did get it pretty fresh. But yeah, it certainly looks the part. As you can see, if I put my fingers behind it, it does have a fair degree of haze to it, but like I said, not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs. Remember, the colour of these beers is dependent on 1, the type of malts that you use, and 2, the length of the wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour. But then the it depends in the first instance on the kind of malts that you use. And the level of haze in New England IPAs is determined by the oats and the wheat content, and I guess the yeast can contribute to that as well. And theoretically speaking, as you go up the alcohol scale, you should get hazier, but that's not always the case. It just depends on what your barley malt to wheat and oat malt ratio is, if you like. But in terms of a New England IPA, nothing particularly surprising about it. Definitely one of the kind of deeper yellow coloured ones that I've come across, like a sort of mixed tropical fruit juice, to be honest with you. Just surprised that it didn't have any head. It only had a very kind of thin foamy layer on the top, and there's just a few kind of tufts, a few wispy kind of tufts sitting there on the top of the beer. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles on the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head. But in terms of a New England hazy IPA, nothing particularly surprising. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then and see how we get on. Oh, that's quite interesting. Quite a little bit of dried fruit coming out of this one, actually. That's the first impression I get of this. Yeah, this beer, it's quite, first impression is it's given a lot of kind of sultanas and these sort of dried fruits actually, which is kind of interesting. But you have got, the other fruits coming out of it as well. We'll come back to the fruits in a minute though. Let's focus on the malt base though, as we always do first. So for me, this beer, it actually is quite interesting. You do get a little bit, it does have a wee bit of that kind of, it's got a good mix of like a sort of jammy and Werther's Original kind of thing to it. A little bit of a kind of dried fruity jammy kind of vibe I'm getting out of this one. I didn't quite expect that from this beer, I have to say. I really didn't expect that from this one. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer I think is very interesting as well. But yeah, on the malty side of things, you can pick up, for me, it's actually one of the sweeter smelling New Englands that I've come across. And as I've told you before, I always find that New Englands can go in a few different directions. They can be a little bit more kind of yeasty and farmhousey. They can be a little bit more kind of grainy and rye leaning. They can be wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy. They can be a little bit sort of more bready and barley malt leaning, but they can also be quite sweet and kind of brown sugar leaning. And this one does have a good little bit of the kind of sweetness coming out of it. There are little elements of bready notes in there, and I'm getting quite a bit of the wheat and the oats as well. Usually these beers will display a few of those different kind of characteristics, but this one is quite interesting. I mean, it comes across as a little bit boozy in the aroma, so you can definitely smell a little bit of it's got a bit of that kind of yeasty, doughy banana type thing there as well, which is quite interesting. So definitely some big kind of oaty notes to it. Definitely a bit of a kind of yeasty banana sort of thing. It's almost got a little bit of a kind of Hefeweizen character to it. So that'll be the wheat that's giving it that. So, I mean, and in fairness, yeah, if you take the aroma in a little bit more deeply, you do get more of those kind of wheaty notes at the back of the nose. But this beer really does have like a little bit of a kind of Hefeweizen type vibe about it in the malty side of things. And I didn't expect that. So it is quite a wheat heavy New England IPA in that sense, but you do get some of the big kind of thick creamy notes from the oats, and you can get a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original brown sugary sort of thing out of it as well, but not so much breadiness. It comes across in the aroma as being very, very thick in the malt base, very kind of thick, and I don't know if is turbid the right word. Maybe turbid's a bit too negative, but yeah, it comes across as if it's really just very thick and kind of almost gloopy in the malt base actually. So I'm really curious to see how that's going to translate into the flavour actually. So yeah, maybe this beer has been sitting just a little bit actually. I'm not sure when Riku would have got a hold of this one, come to think of it. So that is one of the things, that maybe the wheat kind of notes. I find this with New England IPAs, sometimes the wheat and the oats just thicken out a little bit if you leave them to sit, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to review this beer quite soon after I got it. But yeah, really quite a lot. I'm just surprised at the kind of yeasty, doughy, Hefeweizen-y type things that I'm getting out of this. This is really interesting. There is a good bit of a kind of clovey sort of vibe to this beer as well. So yeah, did not expect that. So yeah, take a good bit of time and just ponder over that aroma on the beer actually. But on the hoppy side of things, you do get a nice little bit of earthiness out of it. There's a nice kind of bright floral aromaticity coming out of the beer as well. And I mean, when these hops are sort of 14-15% alpha acid, that's to be expected. And the grassiness at the front of the nose has a good little bit of a zesty character to it as well, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, it's got a lovely little bit of it has, yeah, the green component of this beer I think suits it quite well. It offers a good contrast to that big sort of doughy, quite yeasty and wheaty leaning malt base actually. So yeah, big kind of green component to this beer. Remember, the bitterness and the green component of your beer is dependent on which hops you add early on in the wort boil. You've got that trade-off from early addition hops where it's all about the bitterness over time in the wort boil to being more about flavour and aroma. So probably, yeah, this one smells like it's got a good little bit of a green component to it. So maybe this beer is going to have a wee bit of bitterness. We'll see when we taste it. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, the fruity side of this beer is really quite interesting in a lot of ways. I think the yeast is contributing to this one quite a bit. But yeah, for me, there's quite a lot of I get quite a lot of pear, a lot of sultanas out of this beer. You do get a lot of that kind of forming the backbone of the fruity side of things. You get a wee bit of a stronger passion fruit and quite a lot of mango, which will be the citra, and you do get some of that kind of tangerine note from the mosaic as well, but it comes across as quite oily and almost marmaladey in a sense, and usually that's something you would associate with Amarillo, but in this case, obviously it's mosaic that's doing that. Mosaic is usually a little bit lighter, I think, and less oily than Amarillo, going from memory, but I think you get a lot of kind of gooseberry out of this one, and that's the Enigma that's going to give you that. The Enigma is quite similar to the Nelson Sauvin in a lot of ways, that white green grapey note, but a bit more oily and a bit more gooseberry like in my opinion. But you do get, in fairness, with the Enigma, you can actually pick out a few of these little red components that it gives you as well. So I mean, the fruity side of this beer, I think, is pretty interesting. I'm just, as I say, the thing that really strikes me about this beer is quite surprising is that Hefeweizen vibe that it's got, and these kind of sultana, peary like notes that the beer has. So yeah, definitely take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this one. But I think this is quite an interesting beer from that perspective for sure. But yeah, let's take a look at this one then and see how we go. It's time to have a taste of this. So once again, thank you to Riku for making this review possible. This one is the Pinkdozer, a double hazy New England, whatever you want to call it, IPA, coming in at 8% ABV from Salama Brewing Company in Espoo in the south of Finland. Slange, skål, kippis. Oh yeah, that's pretty nice. That's a big oily thing. That is a big oily New England IPA, absolutely. But I will say, that is pretty damn nice actually. Let me just see. Yeah, it's interesting this, thinking about it, this beer actually reminds me of some of the very early beers that I had from Spike Brewery, actually, in Gothenburg. It really, this one really reminds me of a few of those, actually. So, yeah, it's got a little bit of this. Obviously this brewery are very new. They're only about 2 years old. It still has a little bit of that kind of rawness to it, and I like that. I do like that. So I mean, for me as a New England IPA, this beer is a big, oily, and quite almost chewy type thing. It's still got a wee bit of that booziness to it as well. You do get some of those yeasty notes that I was talking about, but the yeasty character in this beer I don't think is anywhere near as kind of pungent as it would be otherwise. Yeah, I'd be interested to know like the malt base ratio and things. I'd love to have a wee look at the recipe of this beer and just see what the actual ratios are, because this is, I'm an ingredients nerd. I love learning about all the ingredients and stuff you put in beers. But this beer, as I say, as a New England IPA, it's really big and oily and just chewy in a lot of ways. So I'd be curious to know what portion is barley malt, what portion is oats, and which portion is wheat, because I think the wheat's got a good bit of prominence. The barley malt, I think, is giving the beer a good bit of oiliness to it, but I don't think the oats are contributing too much in this one. I think they take a little bit of a back seat compared to the other two. But the main question, is it a nice beer? Yeah, I like this one. So yeah, one of the more oily New Englands that I've come across, and it really does remind me of some of the early beers that I had from Spike Brewing up in Gothenburg, as I said, and I really like their beers. So yeah, where to start with this one then? So this beer, as I say, you can feel that sort of, you can feel the sort of, it's got a bit of that kind of bready, it's almost like a kind of banana bread, to be honest with you, this beer. You've got a bit of an almost kind of banana bread flavour, just blankets the middle third of your palate, which is quite interesting. And that kind of lingers there, actually. That forms the backbone of the beer for me. So as you move further back to that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, there's a nice little bit of a more kind of bread crusty thing in there. Then on the back third of your tongue, you've got a bit of a bigger kind of wheaty, bitey thing starts to come out of the beer. So yeah, there's a bit of a big, thicker, a bit of a bigger, thicker kind of wheaty white presence comes out of this one. So yeah, I mean, I think this beer it does have a good bit of a yeasty presence to it, definitely, because I think otherwise you're not going to really get these sort of banana type flavours out of them. So there's definitely something interesting going on with the wheat and the yeast in this beer for sure. But yeah, the back third of your palate, the wheat isn't even bitey. It has a wee bit of a bitiness and a wee bit of an almost kind of like astringent character, if that's right to say. So it's got a wee bit of that, but you can definitely feel it's got a nice thickness in the back third of your palate. But yeah, as you move further forward, you can feel the thickness just drops away as you reach the kind of border region there. Then the middle third of your tongue, as I say, you've got that condensed sort of banana bread type quality there. Then you can feel some of that kind of boozy alcoholic note sitting on top of that. There's quite a bit of yeasty character sitting on top of that as well. So in the very middle of your palate, you do have a bit of that kind of Werther's Original boozy alcoholic type brown sugar flavour in there. So you get a circle of that in the middle of your tongue. There's like a circle of that Werther's Original kind of brown sugary sort of thing just kind of sitting there. And as you move further out towards the edge of the palate, you might get a wee bit of a kind of biscuity note there. You can feel that on the front half of that middle third of your tongue, there is a bit of an oaty note there, and that sort of thickens the beer out a little bit again. But yeah, I think this beer for me, it really does just have a little bit of a kind of Hefeweizen type vibe about it. Let me just see, does this can have like a canned on date or something? No. Oh, sorry, it does actually. Canned on the 17th of December 2020. And I mean, I'm filming this review for you on the 21st of February. So yes, it's 2 months in the can. So normally you should drink these beers within 6 weeks. So it's a little bit beyond that. So, some of these sort of oily brown sugary notes in this beer, they will be a little bit more pronounced. The wheat will have thickened up a little bit in this one, in fairness, but it shouldn't, unless it was brewed, it's not going to thicken up to this extent in that amount of time, if that makes sense. So yeah, this beer, I think it is fair to kind of stick with that statement. This beer has been brewed to be a little bit more of a kind of yeasty and wheaty leaning New England double for me. It really, if you're a fan of like Hopfenweisses and stuff like this, I guess maybe Weizen, I don't know if you could say Weizenbox, it does have a wee bit of that sort of vibe to it, and I like that. It's quite a different New England IPA. There's so many kind of hazies that are out there on the market these days. You want things to be a bit different, and this one certainly is that. So thumbs up to them for taking a bit of a different approach. I would be curious to know though if they do have ones that are a little bit more soft and kind of oaty and things like this. I would be curious to know what some of their other IPAs are like. So I'm sure maybe in the next box we'll get another few things from Salama, I'm sure. But it's a very nice beer, this one. I think we've covered the malty side of things and the yeasty side of things as much as we really need to be honest. But you will feel a wee bit of a kind of banana bread, slightly clovey thing coming out of this beer the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, in the back corners of the palate there is a little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, the earthiness dissipates quite quickly and it very quickly becomes a nice big sort of floral aromatic sort of thing. You do get quite a nice little bit of a very deep floral aromaticity again when these hops are like 14-15% alpha acid. It's going to be like that, and you can tell from the flavour of this one, most of the hops in this beer have been added as late additions. It's not got such a big like dankness to it, but round the front curve of the palate, the beer is distinctly kind of lighter and more floral, if you like, in its characteristics, and I do like that. But this one for sure, the green component of this beer I think suits what's going on in the malty and yeasty side of things really nicely. But yeah, on the front third of your palate, you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a kind of thicker kind of bready note to it. There's a bit yeasty as well. You get a bit of that Hefeweizen type vibe in there as well. But at the back of that front third of your palate, you can feel some of the nice tropical fruits, but underpinning the whole fruity side of the beer, you can feel a little bit of the kind of smooth sort of wheaty qualities in there. And again, you get a wee bit of that sort of banana, just banana clovey, hefeweizen-y sort of thing underneath. But yeah, the back of that front third of your palate, there's definitely a nice bit of passion fruit there, a bit of that slightly stronger, more pungent passion fruit. As you move forward, you'll get a little bit more of a kind of sweet, you get a little bit more of a kind of mango-y type vibe in there. And then as you reach the kind of middle part of that front third of your tongue, there's a few bits of apricot and things in there as well. Some of these more dried tropical fruits there. It does have a bit of a kind of sultana vibe to it, this beer as well, which is quite interesting. You know, dried white and green grapes, come to think of it. But yeah, pardon me, as you move on to the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, you can feel the sort of gooseberry side of the Enigma kind of forming the base of the beer, particularly on the very kind of front tip of your tongue, if you like. But on top of that, you do get a very nice, you get a little bit of a sort of, what would you say, a little bit of a kind of, the more tangerine-y orange notes from the mosaic as well, and they add a nice little bit of complexity to the beer. And I want to say that there's a wee bit of pineapple starts to come out of this one a bit later on as well, which is interesting. But you can feel that on the very kind of tip of your tongue, the gooseberry notes, you get a little bit of a slightly oily character in there, and that's when you start to get just a little touch of that kind of very slight red curranty, almost figgy type thing from the Enigma in the beer as well. But that's a real subtlety that you do have to look for that, in fairness. But yeah, this is a really quite quirky beer in a lot of ways. I like how that goes together. So thumbs up to Salama. This is quite different. I do, you know, when you've reviewed 2,700 beers, you want things that are going to test you a little bit and make you think. And this beer has certainly done that. And I don't know if that's the reason why Riku chose this one specifically, or maybe if it was just to give me a different style from this brewery. But you know, when it comes to these beers, Riku messages me and it's like, do you want this? And I'm like, sure. Most of the time it's like, why not? I just let him pick what he sends me from Finland. So yeah, I'm glad that he sent me this one. So Riku, thank you for picking out this beer. But yeah, it's a solid New England, this one. But like I say, bit of a Hefeweizen vibe to it, and definitely one of the more oily examples of that sub-style, if you like. So on that note then, the mouthfeel. For me, this beer is kind of at the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. The beer itself has a bit of slickness to it. Like I said, it's a very oily New England IPA, and this beer, a lot of flavours develop out of this in the aftertaste. It's got a really nice dried, fruity and yeasty aftertaste to it. In terms of hoppy bitterness, this beer is not going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness. I think this one, it's a double IPA, so I'd be tempted to say it's got about 40 IBUs to it. The standard for a New England, of course, is 30, but I think there's a 10 IBU rule if you go to double and triple. You know, 30 for a single, 40 for a double, and then 50 for a triple. I think this one does have a wee bit more bitterness to it, in fairness. But remember, this is my weakest part of beer reviewing, is picking out the IBUs. I always get that wrong. But yeah, like I say, the middle of your palate has a kind of solid and slightly thicker yeasty component to it. There's a good little bit of a brown sugary sweetness in there. You've got some very, very nice you've got a really nice little bit of sweetness there, but quite a lot of yeasty character in that kind of malty base. You've got some nice big oily fruity characters to this one. I would definitely describe the fruits as oily in this beer. Then the green component just has a good kind of level of floral aromaticity, but at the same time it does feel quite nice and deep in that sense as well. So yeah, this is a really interesting beer. I have enjoyed this one. And again, thank you to Riku for making this possible. This has been a nice beer to review for number 2,700, so I hope that you guys have enjoyed it as well. And it's nice to return to Finland after a little while. I've still got a couple of beers from Riku box number 1, some of the big boys, but those will sit there quite happily for a little while. It's the lighter ones, it's the IPAs and the sours and the lagers that we need to kind of get through first. But yeah, this one was the Pinkdozer, a double New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Salama Brewing in Espoo in the south of Finland, right next to Helsinki. Thank you again to Riku for supplying me with this beer. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Salama Brewing Company as well. Do let me know some of the other Finnish beers and breweries that we should check out. Riku, of course, does have a good grip on these things, but if you guys have other suggestions, that's always interesting to hear as well. But thank you again for watching. And I'm sure you'll see another beer from these guys at some point fairly soon, within the next month or two, I would say. So yeah, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out Salama Brewing Company, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. The Pinkdozer New England Double IPA, 8% ABV from Salama Brewing in Espoo in southern Finland. Slanja, skål, keepus, cheers, and kiitos.